The alarm bells rang through the corridors of the human starship New Dawn. Captain Jake Morrison pushed himself up from his chair on the bridge and looked at the main screen. The stars stretched out before them like tiny diamonds scattered across black fabric. "What do we have, Lisa?" Morrison asked his second-in-command. Commander Lisa Hayes turned from her station with a worried look on her face. "We're picking up a distress signal, Captain. It's coming from the Thakmor system." Morrison felt his stomach drop. Every human in the galaxy knew about the Thakmor system. It was forbidden territory, marked with red warning beacons that told all ships to stay away. The Galactic Federation had quarantined that system for over 200 years. "Are you certain?" Morrison walked over to Hayes' station and looked at the data scrolling across her screen. "Yes, sir. The signal is weak, but it's definitely a distress call. It's in the Kethvar language." Hayes looked up at Morrison with concern in her eyes. "Captain, they're asking for medical help. The message keeps repeating that their people are dying." Dr. Alan Cooper stepped forward from his position near the science station. He was a tall man with gray hair who had spent most of his life studying alien species. "Captain, we have to help them." Morrison shook his head slowly. "Alan, you know the rules. The Federation has banned all contact with the Kethvar. They're considered too dangerous for civilized contact. But they're dying," Cooper said firmly. "Whatever they did in the past, they're still living beings. Doesn't that mean something?" Morrison walked to the center of the bridge and stared at the main screen. He had joined the Federation because he believed it stood for helping others and making the galaxy a better place. But the Kethvar were different. Everyone knew they were violent creatures who had once enslaved entire star systems. "Computer, show me the Federation files on the Kethvar species," Morrison ordered. The main screen changed to show a series of reports and images. The Kethvar looked like large lizards that walked on two legs. They had sharp teeth, clawed hands, and yellow eyes that seemed to glow. The reports described them as natural-born killers who had conquered 3 neighboring systems before the Federation stopped them. "Look at this," Hayes said, reading from her station. 200 years ago, they enslaved millions of beings from the Valix and Grathar systems. They used them as forced laborers in their mining operations. When the Federation intervened, the Kethvar fought back with terrible brutality. Cooper crossed his arms. "That was 2 centuries ago, Lisa. These people calling for help weren't even alive then." "But their parents were," Hayes replied. "And their grandparents. Violence like that doesn't just disappear from a species." Morrison continued reading the reports. The Federation had tried to negotiate with the Kethvar leaders after defeating their military forces, but the talks had failed when the Kethvar refused to give up their aggressive ways. In the end, the Federation had decided that the galaxy would be safer if the Kethvar were kept isolated on their home planet. "Captain," the communications officer called out, "the distress signal is getting stronger. I think we're picking up more details." "Put it on speakers," Morrison ordered. A harsh, growling voice filled the bridge. Even though the computer translated the words into English, the alien voice sounded desperate and frightened. "This is Thakmor calling any ship in range. Our people are dying from a sickness we cannot cure. Our children are suffering. Please, if anyone can hear this message, we need medical supplies and doctors. We will give anything in return for help." The bridge fell silent. Morrison could hear the pain in the alien voice even through the translation. It didn't sound like the voice of a violent conqueror. It sounded like the voice of a parent watching his children die. "How many of them are left?" Morrison asked quietly. Cooper checked his readings. "According to long-range sensors, the population of Thakmor has dropped from 8 billion to less than 2 billion in the past 50 years. Captain, they're facing extinction." Morrison felt a cold chill run down his spine. An entire species was dying, and no one in the galaxy was helping them. The Federation had written them off as too dangerous to save. "Sir," Hayes said carefully, "we should contact Federation Command and report the distress signal. They'll want to know about this." Morrison nodded slowly, but something bothered him about that idea. If the Federation had known the Kethvar were dying for 50 years, why hadn't they done anything? Even dangerous animals deserved medical care when they were sick. "Computer, show me recent Federation reports about the Thakmor system," he ordered. The screen filled with surveillance reports dating back decades. Morrison's eyes widened as he read them. The Federation had been watching the Kethvar die for years. They knew about the sickness, knew about the falling population, but had decided to do nothing. One report from 5 years ago caught his attention. It was from Admiral Helen Brooks, the Federation's top military commander. The report recommended continuing the quarantine because the natural decline of the Kethavar population removes a long-term threat to galactic stability. Morrison felt sick to his stomach. The Federation wasn't just ignoring the dying Kethavar. They were happy to let them die. Captain? Hayes was watching him with concern. What are your orders? Morrison looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. These were good people who had joined the Federation to explore space and help others. Dr. Cooper had spent his whole career trying to understand alien species and find ways to help them. Hayes had fought in 3 wars to protect innocent civilians from pirates and raiders. Plot a course for the Thakmor system, Morrison said quietly. Hayes's eyes went wide. Sir, that's a direct violation of Federation law. We could all face court-martial. I know, Morrison replied. But I didn't join the Federation to watch entire species die while we do nothing. Cooper stepped forward with determination in his eyes. I'm with you, Captain. If there's a chance we can help them, we have to try. This could destroy our careers, Hayes warned. It could destroy humanity's relationship with the Federation. Morrison looked at her seriously. Lisa, what good is our relationship with the Federation if it means we have to ignore people who need our help? Hayes was quiet for a long moment, thinking. Finally, she nodded. You're right, Captain. Setting course for Thakmor now. As the New Dawn changed direction and headed toward the Forbidden System, Morrison wondered what they would find there. The Federation said the Kethavar were monsters who couldn't be trusted, but the voice on that distress signal hadn't sounded like a monster. It had sounded like someone who was scared and desperate to save his people. Maybe it was time for humanity to decide for themselves what the Kethavar really were. The journey to Thakmor would take 3 days. During that time, Morrison knew he would have to prepare his crew for whatever they might find. They were about to become the first beings in 2 centuries to make contact with the galaxy's most feared species, and Morrison had a feeling that nothing would ever be the same again. 3 days later, the New Dawn dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Thakmor system. Captain Morrison stood on the bridge and stared at what he saw on the main screen. The planet looked nothing like the dangerous world he had expected. Thakmor was covered in brown and gray clouds. The sensors showed that most of the planet's cities had gone dark. Only a few scattered settlements still had power. The orbital defense stations that should have challenged their arrival were silent and empty. My God, whispered Commander Hayes. It looks like a dead world. Dr. Cooper was busy studying the sensor readings. The atmosphere is badly polluted. I'm reading high levels of toxic chemicals that shouldn't be there naturally. This isn't just a disease, Captain. Something has poisoned their entire planet. Before Morrison could respond, a weak signal came through their communication system. The voice was the same one they had heard 3 days ago, but now it sounded even more desperate. Unknown ship, please identify yourself. Are you here to help us or to watch us die like the others? Morrison felt confused. What others? Computer, are there any other ships in this system? Negative, Captain. We are the only active vessel detected. Morrison opened a communication channel. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the human starship New Dawn. We received your distress call and we're here to help. There was a long silence. Then the alien voice returned, sounding shocked. Humans, but your Federation has forbidden contact with us for 200 years. Why would you come here now? Because you asked for help, Morrison replied simply. We're doctors and scientists. If you're sick, we want to try to cure you. Another long pause. You must speak with War Chief Grakthar. I'm sending you landing coordinates for our main medical facility. Hayes looked worried. Captain, this could be a trap. Maybe they're trying to capture us. Morrison shook his head. If they wanted to hurt us, they would have tried when we arrived. Besides, look at their planet. They don't have enough power left to run a trap. 20 minutes later, Morrison, Dr. Cooper, and Dr. Susan Taylor, the ship's medical officer, walked down the shuttle ramp onto the surface of Thakmor. The air smelled strange and bitter even through their protective suits. The Kethavar who met them was enormous. He stood nearly 8 feet tall with dark green scales and yellow eyes. His clawed hands could have easily torn a human apart. But as he approached them, Morrison noticed that the alien was limping badly and looked very tired. I am War Chief Grakthar, the Kethavar said through his translator device. You are either very brave or very foolish to come here, humans. Dr. Taylor stepped forward with her medical scanner. We're here to help. Can you show us your sick people? Grakthar studied them suspiciously. Why would the Softskins help the galaxy's monsters? Your Federation has made it clear that we deserve to die for our past crimes. We're not here for the Federation, Morrison said firmly. We're here because people are dying and we might be able to save them. Grakthar led them into a large building that had once been beautiful, but now looked run down and damaged. Inside, Morrison saw something that broke his heart. Hundreds of Kethvar lay on beds, coughing and struggling to breathe. Many of them were children who looked too weak to lift their heads. Dr. Taylor immediately got to work with her medical equipment. She scanned several of the sick Kethvar while Dr. Cooper studied the air and water samples they had collected. "This is terrible," Dr. Taylor whispered to Morrison. "Their immune systems are completely destroyed. It's like they've been poisoned slowly over many years." A smaller Kethvar approached them. She was about the size of a human teenager, with lighter green scales and frightened eyes. She collapsed near Dr. Taylor's feet, coughing up blood. "That is my daughter Zethara," Grakthar said quietly. "She was born after the quarantine began. She has never hurt anyone, but the sickness is killing her anyway." Dr. Taylor immediately began treating the young Kethvar with medicines from the shuttle. "Captain, we need to get her back to our ship. Our medical bay has better equipment." Grakthar stepped back in alarm. "You want to take my daughter to your ship? How do I know you won't experiment on her or hurt her?" "Because," Morrison said, looking directly into the war chief's yellow eyes, "we're not the kind of people who hurt children. Ever." Something in Morrison's voice seemed to convince Grakthar. He nodded slowly and allowed Dr. Taylor to take Zethara to the shuttle. Back on the New Dawn, Engineer Paul Davis was busy helping Kethvar technicians repair their failing power systems. As he worked, he talked with them through translation devices and learned things that shocked him. They weren't conquerors, Davis reported to Morrison over the communication system. "Captain, the Federation records are wrong. The Kethvar were refugees." Morrison felt his blood run cold. "What do you mean?" "Their original home planet was dying from volcanic activity. They had to evacuate billions of people quickly. When they moved to the Velix and Grathar systems, they were trying to save those people too. The planets were being destroyed by solar flares." Morrison sat down heavily in his captain's chair. "So they weren't enslaving people. They were trying to rescue them." "That's right," Davis continued. "But the Federation didn't understand what was happening. They saw armed Kethvar ships taking people from planets and thought it was conquest. When they attacked, millions of refugees died in the crossfire." Dr. Cooper's voice came through the communication system from the planet's surface. "Captain, I found something else. The sickness isn't natural. Someone has been slowly releasing poisonous chemicals into their atmosphere for decades." "Who would do that?" Morrison asked. "I don't know yet, but I'm finding traces of Federation technology in the delivery systems." Morrison felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. The Federation hadn't just quarantined the Kethvar. They had been slowly killing them. In the medical bay, Dr. Taylor was working frantically to save Zethara's life. The young Kethvar was unconscious and barely breathing. Her father sat beside her bed, holding her clawed hand in his massive paws. "Will she live?" Grakthar asked quietly. "I don't know," Dr. Taylor admitted. "The poison has damaged her organs badly, but I'm going to try everything I can." Grakthar looked up at her with eyes full of pain. She has never seen the stars beyond this poisoned sky. She has never known what it's like to breathe clean air. All she has known is sickness and death. Dr. Taylor felt tears in her eyes. "That's not right. No child should have to live like that. The Federation says we deserve this because of what our ancestors did," Grakthar said bitterly. "They say we are too violent to be trusted." "Your ancestors were trying to save people," Dr. Taylor replied. "There's nothing violent about that." Grakthar stared at her in surprise. "How do you know this?" "Because we've been investigating. The Federation lied about what really happened 200 years ago." For the first time since they had arrived, Grakthar smiled. It was a frightening sight with all those sharp teeth, but Dr. Taylor could see the relief and gratitude behind it. "Your people are the first to treat us like living beings instead of monsters," he said. "Why are humans different from the other Federation species?" Dr. Taylor thought about that question as she continued working to save his daughter. "Maybe because we remember what it's like to be outcasts too. Humans weren't always accepted by the galaxy. We had to prove ourselves. And now you risk everything to help us prove ourselves too," Grakthar said softly. On the bridge, Morrison received a priority message from Federation Command. Admiral Helen Brooks appeared on the screen with an angry expression. Captain Morrison, you are ordered to leave Kethvar space immediately. You are in violation of direct Federation law. Admiral, these people are dying. They need medical help. They are dangerous criminals who deserve their fate, Brooks replied coldly. You have 24 hours to withdraw or humanity will face serious consequences. The communication ended, leaving Morrison staring at a dark screen. He now had to choose between obeying orders and saving innocent lives. Looking around his bridge at his dedicated crew, Morrison made his decision. They would stay and fight for the Kethvar no matter what it cost them. Back on Earth, Ambassador Richard Stone sat in the Federation Council chambers watching the other alien representatives argue about humanity's actions. The council meeting had been going on for 6 hours, and Stone could see that most of the other species were angry with humans. The Valix ambassador, a tall blue-skinned being with 4 arms, spoke first. The humans have broken Federation law by contacting the Kethvar. They must be punished. The Gratha representative, who looked like a walking tree with glowing leaves, agreed. The Kethvar are dangerous. The humans are putting all of us at risk by helping them. Stone stood up slowly. He was an older man with gray hair who had spent 20 years working with alien species. Honored council members, the humans are providing medical aid to a dying species. Isn't that what the Federation is supposed to stand for? The council leader, a jellyfish-like creature that floated in a tank of water, spoke with a bubbling voice. Ambassador Stone, the Kethvar were quarantined for good reason. They enslaved millions of beings and showed no remorse for their actions. But what if that information is wrong? Stone asked. What if the Kethvar were actually trying to help those people? The chamber fell silent. The other ambassadors looked at each other with worried expressions. That is impossible, the Valix ambassador said quickly. Our records clearly show that the Kethvar were conquerors. Stone pulled out a datapad and activated it. Images appeared on the chamber's main screen showing the reports that Captain Morrison had sent to Earth. These are sensor readings from the Thakmor system, Stone explained. They show that someone has been slowly poisoning the Kethvar planet for decades. The poison delivery systems use Federation technology. The council chamber erupted in angry voices. Several ambassadors stood up and began shouting at once. Silence, the council leader commanded. The chamber became quiet. Ambassador Stone, these are very serious accusations. Do you have proof that the Federation is responsible for this alleged poisoning? My government is investigating, Stone replied carefully. But the evidence is very strong. The council leader's tentacles moved nervously in his water tank. The humans have 24 hours to withdraw from Kethvar space. If they refuse, humanity will be expelled from the Federation. Stone felt his heart sink. Without the Federation, humanity would be alone in a galaxy full of potentially hostile species. But he also knew that Captain Morrison was doing the right thing. Meanwhile, on Thakmor, Dr. Taylor was making progress treating the sick Kethvar. She had managed to stabilize Zethara's condition, and the young alien was finally awake and talking. Thank you for helping me, Zethara said in broken English. She was learning the human language from the computer translation system. You're welcome, Dr. Taylor replied with a smile. How do you feel? Better than I have in months. The pain in my chest is almost gone. Zethara looked at Dr. Taylor with curious yellow eyes. Why are humans helping us? Everyone else in the galaxy hates us. Dr. Taylor sat down beside the medical bed. We don't think you should be hated for things that happened before you were born. That's not fair. Dr. Cooper had been working day and night to understand the poison affecting the Kethvar. He called Morrison to his laboratory with urgent news. Captain, I've figured out how to cure the sickness, Cooper said excitedly. But we need specific medical supplies that aren't available on this planet. What kind of supplies? Morrison asked. Cooper showed him a list on his computer screen. These are rare medicines that can only be made in advanced Federation laboratories. Without them, I can't produce enough cure for the entire Kethvar population. Morrison felt frustrated. The Federation had the medicines the Kethvar needed, but they would never provide them to a quarantined species. Lieutenant Commander Beth Johnson had been leading a team to investigate the poison's source. She contacted Morrison with disturbing news. Captain, we found the origin point of the poison. There are hidden Federation research stations in this system's asteroid field. Morrison felt sick to his stomach. How many stations? At least 12 that we can detect. They've been operating for over 50 years, slowly releasing toxins into Thakmor's atmosphere. Get me everything you can on those stations. We need proof of what the Federation has been doing. Johnson and her team spent hours breaking into the abandoned research station's computer systems. What they found was worse than anyone had imagined. The Federation hadn't just been testing biological weapons on the Kethvar. They had been using them as guinea pigs for different types of poisons and diseases. The research stations had detailed records of how different chemicals affected Kethvar biology. One report made Morrison feel physically ill. It described how Federation scientists had deliberately infected Kethvar children with various diseases to study their immune systems. "This is genocide," Johnson said quietly as she read through the files. "They've been slowly killing an entire species for scientific research." Morrison called Grakthar to the New Dawn to show him the evidence they had found. The war chief's reaction was terrible to see. His yellow eyes filled with rage and his claws extended as he read the reports. "They used our children as test subjects," Grakthar growled in a voice full of fury. "They poisoned our world and watched us die while taking notes." Morrison expected Grakthar to demand revenge against the Federation. Instead, the war chief surprised him. "Captain Morrison, my people want to live in peace with the galaxy. We have no desire for conquest or revenge, but we need to survive first. What do you want us to do?" Morrison asked. Grakthar looked at him with determination in his eyes. "Help my people heal and we will prove we are more than the monsters they made us appear to be." Morrison realized that saving the Kethvar meant much more than just providing medical aid. It meant challenging the entire Federation power structure and exposing their crimes to the galaxy. Dr. Taylor had been working with Kethvar healers to understand their traditional medicine. She discovered that they had knowledge about treating diseases that human doctors had never seen before. "They're not primitive," she reported to Morrison. "Their medical knowledge is different from ours, but in some ways it's more advanced. They understand how to heal emotional trauma along with physical injuries." "What do you mean?" Morrison asked. "They believe that sickness comes from more than just germs or poison. They think it also comes from sadness, fear, and loneliness. Their healers work to cure the whole person, not just the symptoms." Morrison thought about that. The Kethvar had been isolated and hated for 200 years. Maybe their physical sickness was made worse by the emotional pain of being rejected by the entire galaxy. On the bridge, Communications Officer Danny Price received a message from Federation Command. Admiral Brooks appeared on the screen looking angrier than before. "Captain Morrison, you have violated direct orders and remained in Kethvar space. Humanity now faces expulsion from the Federation." Morrison stood up straight and looked directly at the Admiral. "Admiral Brooks, we have evidence that the Federation has been committing genocide against the Kethvar people." Brooks's face went pale. "That's a very serious accusation, Captain." "It's also true." Morrison had Johnson transmit the data from the research stations to Federation Command. "These are your own records, Admiral. They show 50 years of illegal biological weapons testing." Brooks was quiet for a long moment as she reviewed the files. When she looked up again, her expression was cold and hard. "Captain, those operations were classified for the security of the Federation. The Kethvar were considered acceptable test subjects because of their past crimes." Morrison felt disgusted. "They were children, Admiral. Innocent children who had never hurt anyone." "The greater good sometimes requires difficult choices," Brooks replied. "You have 6 hours to leave Kethvar space or face the consequences." After the communication ended, Morrison gathered his senior officers on the bridge. He looked at each of them carefully. "You all know what we're facing," he said quietly. "If we stay here and continue helping the Kethvar, we'll be declared enemies of the Federation. Our careers will be over, and humanity might be kicked out of the galactic community." Commander Hayes spoke first. "Captain, what they've done to these people is wrong. We can't just walk away." Dr. Cooper nodded. "I agree. We took an oath to help people in need. That has to mean something." Dr. Taylor looked determined. "Zethara and the other children deserve a chance to live healthy lives. We can't abandon them now." Morrison felt proud of his crew. They were willing to sacrifice everything to do what was right. "Then we stay," he decided, "and we find a way to save the Kethvar no matter what it costs us." 2 days after Admiral Brooks's ultimatum, the space around Thakmor began to fill with ships. Captain Morrison stood on the bridge of the New Dawn watching in amazement as Federation vessels dropped out of faster-than-light travel one after another. Commander Hayes counted the arriving ships on her sensors. "Captain, I'm reading over 200 Federation vessels. They've brought their entire Fifth Fleet. The massive Federation fleet was led by Admiral Charles Grant aboard the battleship Dominion. Grant was known throughout the galaxy as a man who followed orders without question, no matter how harsh they might be. Morrison opened a communication channel to the Federation fleet.
Admiral Grant, this is Captain Morrison.
We are providing medical assistance to a dying species. We request that you allow us to continue our humanitarian mission. Grant's face appeared on the main screen. He was an older man with cold gray eyes and a stern expression. Captain Morrison, you and your crew are in violation of Federation law. You will surrender immediately and prepare to be taken into custody. We cannot do that, Admiral. These people will die without our help. Grant's expression did not change. The fate of the Kethavar is not your concern, Captain. They have been judged by the Federation Council and found guilty of crimes against galactic peace. Morrison felt anger rising in his chest. Admiral, we have evidence that the Federation has been slowly poisoning the Kethavar for 50 years. They are the victims here, not the criminals. I have seen your so-called evidence, Grant replied coldly. Those operations were necessary for galactic security. The Kethavar are too dangerous to be allowed to recover their strength. Before Morrison could respond, Dr. Cooper burst onto the bridge with urgent news. Captain, I'm picking up new ships entering the system. They're not Federation vessels. Morrison looked at the sensor readings and felt his heart jump with hope. A convoy of human medical ships had arrived, led by Captain Karen White aboard the hospital ship Mercy. Behind them came more human vessels carrying supplies and medicine. Captain White's voice came through the communication system. Captain Morrison, we received your reports about the situation here. We've come to help. Admiral Grant's face turned red with anger. Captain White, you are also in violation of Federation law. Return to human space immediately. I'm afraid we can't do that, Admiral. White replied calmly. We have sick patients who need our care. More ships continued to arrive throughout the day. Commander Steve Parker brought a fleet of human merchant vessels loaded with the rare medicines that Dr. Cooper needed to cure the Kethavar plague. Captain Tony Rodriguez arrived with engineering ships to help repair the damaged infrastructure on Thakmor. Grant watched the growing human presence with growing frustration. He contacted Admiral Brooks at Federation Command for new orders. Admiral, the humans are refusing to comply. What are my instructions? Brooks appeared on Grant's private screen looking tired and worried. Charles, the political situation has become very complicated. Several Federation species are asking questions about our Kethavar operations. What kind of questions? The kind that could destroy the Federation if they're answered honestly. Brooks replied, You need to end this situation quickly before it gets out of control. Grant nodded grimly. Understood. I'll take care of it. The next morning, Grant gave orders that shocked even his own officers. All ships prepare to fire on the human medical vessels. We will destroy them if they do not withdraw immediately. Lieutenant Amy Foster, Grant's communications officer, looked at him in disbelief. Admiral, those are hospital ships. They're treating sick civilians. They are illegal combatants interfering with Federation operations. Grant replied coldly. Fire on my command. Foster stared at her admiral for a long moment. Then she did something that surprised everyone on the bridge. She activated the fleet's general communication system and broadcast Grant's orders to every ship in the system. All vessels, this is Lieutenant Foster, aboard the Federation battleship Dominion. Admiral Grant has ordered the destruction of human medical ships treating Kethavar civilians. This is a violation of galactic law and basic morality. Grant's face turned purple with rage. Foster, you are under arrest for mutiny. But it was too late. Foster's broadcast had been heard by every ship in the system, and the news was already spreading across Federation networks. Within hours, the entire galaxy knew that the Federation was preparing to attack hospital ships. The reaction was swift and shocking. On dozens of Federation worlds, protests broke out as people demanded to know why their government was trying to kill doctors and patients. Several Federation species began to question whether they wanted to remain part of an organization that would commit such acts. The first species to break ranks was the Scifi, a race of tall, thin beings with silver skin. They had their own bitter history with the Federation, having been pacified by Federation forces 30 years earlier when they refused to give up their traditional way of life. Admiral Kethmarai of the Scifi fleet arrived at Thakmor with 20 warships. She contacted Captain Morrison directly. Captain Morrison, The Zephi people remember what it is like to be judged unfairly by the Federation. We stand with you and the Kethvar. Soon after, the crystalline Vorthak arrived. Their ships looked like flying jewels as they took positions around Thakmor. Their leader, Prime Crystal Velthanis, had a voice that sounded like wind chimes. The Vorthak have studied the evidence of Federation crimes against the Kethvar. We find the Federation guilty of genocide and declare our support for the human intervention. Admiral Grant found himself facing not just a handful of human ships, but a growing alliance of Federation species who were willing to fight for the Kethvar's right to live. The situation became even more complicated when War Chief Grakthar contacted Morrison with surprising news. "Captain, we have been working to repair our old ships. Some of them are space-worthy again." Morrison felt concerned. "Grakthar, please don't do anything that might make the situation worse." "We do not seek conflict," the war chief replied. "But we will not hide while others fight to defend us. The Kethvar have been called cowards for too long." That afternoon, the first Kethvar ships to fly in over 200 years rose from the surface of Thakmor. They were old and damaged, but they had been repaired with determination and hope. The ships took positions alongside the human and allied vessels. Grakthar's ship, a massive vessel called the Redemption, moved close to the new dawn. The war chief contacted Morrison directly. "Captain Morrison, my people want you to know that we will never forget what you have done for us. You risked everything to save us when no one else would." Morrison felt emotional as he looked at the Kethvar ships on his screen. "Grakthar, your people deserve to live free and healthy lives. That's not something anyone should have to fight for." "Yet here we are fighting for exactly that," Grakthar replied. "But we are not fighting alone anymore." Admiral Grant realized that his situation had become impossible. He was facing a coalition of different species united by their opposition to Federation policies. If he attacked now, he might start a galactic civil war. He contacted Admiral Brooks again. "Admiral, I recommend that we withdraw. The political cost of attacking this coalition could destroy the Federation." Brooks was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice sounded defeated. "Charles, I've been receiving reports from across Federation space. 17 species are threatening to leave the Federation if we attack the medical ships. The Council is in chaos. What are your orders?" Grant asked. "Hold your position, but do not fire. We need time to figure out how to handle this situation." On Thakmor, Dr. Taylor was making remarkable progress treating Kethvar patients. With the new medicines and equipment brought by the human medical ships, she had been able to cure hundreds of people. Zethara was now healthy enough to help translate between human doctors and Kethvar patients. She had become a bridge between the two species, helping them understand each other. "Dr. Taylor," Zethara said as they worked together in the medical facility, "my father says that humans are the first species to treat us like people instead of monsters. Why are you different?" Dr. Taylor thought about the question as she prepared medicine for a young Kethvar child. "Maybe because we know what it's like to be misunderstood. Humans haven't always been accepted by other species either." "Will the galaxy ever accept us the way they accept humans?" Zethara asked hopefully. "I think so," Dr. Taylor replied with a smile, "especially if they get to know young people like you." As night fell over Thakmor, Morrison stood on the bridge looking at the ships gathered around the planet. Human vessels worked alongside Zephi warships, Vorthak crystal ships, and repaired Kethvar fighters. It was the strangest alliance in galactic history, brought together by a simple belief that all people deserve to live. The Federation had brought overwhelming force to crush the human intervention. Instead, they had created something new and powerful, a coalition of species willing to stand up for what was right, even when it was dangerous. 1 week after the standoff began, Captain Morrison received an unexpected message. The communication came from Admiral Helen Brooks herself, but this time she was not calling to threaten him. "Captain Morrison, this is Admiral Brooks. I'm requesting permission to meet with you aboard your vessel." Morrison looked at Commander Hayes with surprise. "She wants to meet with us? That doesn't sound like the same Admiral who threatened to destroy our careers." Hayes checked her sensors. "Captain, I'm reading a single Federation command ship approaching our position. No escort vessels are very well. Tell Admiral Brooks she has permission to come aboard." 2 hours later, Admiral Brooks walked onto the bridge of the New Dawn. She looked older than Morrison remembered, and her uniform seemed too heavy for her tired shoulders. "Admiral," Morrison said politely, "what can we do for you?" Brooks looked around the bridge at Morrison's crew. Captain, I've come to tell you that the Federation Council has voted to end the Kethvar quarantine. Morrison felt a surge of hope. Does that mean we can continue helping them? Brooks nodded slowly. Yes, but there's more. The Council has also voted to dissolve the current Federation government. Too many species have learned the truth about our secret operations. Dr. Cooper stepped forward. What will happen to all the Federation worlds? We're forming something new, Brooks replied. We're calling it the Free Worlds Alliance. It will be based on cooperation instead of fear and control. Morrison felt amazed by this news. Admiral, why are you telling us this personally? Brooks looked directly at him. Because what you did here changed everything, Captain. You showed the galaxy that sometimes the right choice is also the hard choice. Over the next few months, the changes came quickly. The old Federation collapsed as more and more species learned about the illegal experiments and cover-ups. In its place, something new and better began to grow. Dr. Taylor worked with Kethvar healers to establish the galaxy's first interspecies medical research center on Thakmor. The facility brought together doctors and scientists from dozens of worlds to share knowledge and develop new treatments for diseases. We're learning so much from each other, Dr. Taylor reported to Morrison. The Kethvar understanding of emotional healing combined with human surgical techniques and Vorthak crystal therapy is saving lives we never could have saved before. Engineer Paul Davis led teams of humans, Kethvar, and other species in building new cities on Thakmor. The designs blended Kethvar architectural strength with human environmental harmony and alien technologies from across the galaxy. You should see the new capital city, Davis told Morrison excitedly. It has buildings that can heal themselves when damaged, air purification systems that actually make the atmosphere cleaner than it was originally, and transportation tunnels that move people without any pollution. Captain Karen White established trade routes that gave the Kethvar their first legitimate economy in over 2 centuries. Kethvar craftsmen began selling their beautiful metalwork to other worlds, while Kethvar healers traveled throughout the galaxy, teaching their emotional therapy techniques. They're natural traders, White reported. The Kethvar have a talent for understanding what different species need and finding ways to provide it. War Chief Grakthar surprised everyone by becoming the first Kethvar ambassador to the Free Worlds Alliance. His daughter Zethara had grown strong and healthy, and she decided to become a doctor like Dr. Taylor. I want to help other children who are sick, Zethara told Morrison when she announced her decision. Dr. Taylor showed me that healing people is the most important work anyone can do. Morrison felt proud watching the young Kethvar work alongside human medical students. She had become a bridge between species, helping them understand each other in ways that had never been possible before. 6 months after first hearing the Kethvar distress call, Morrison stood on the observation deck of a new space station orbiting Thakmor. The station was a joint project between humans, Kethvar, and 6 other species working together. Grakthar joined him at the large window overlooking the planet. Thakmor looked completely different now. The brown and gray clouds had been replaced by blue skies and white clouds. Green forests were growing where poisoned wastelands had been. Your people could have ignored us, Grakthar said quietly. The galaxy gave you every reason to let us die. Morrison watched human and Kethvar children playing together in the station's recreation area. That's exactly why we couldn't ignore you. I do not understand, Grakthar replied. Morrison turned to face the war chief. If we had ignored your distress call, we would have become the kind of people who let children die when we could save them. That's not who we want to be. Grakthar nodded slowly. The galaxy is learning that strength does not come from making others afraid. True strength comes from helping others become strong too. Morrison looked back at the planet where construction crews were building schools, hospitals, and research centers. Ships from dozens of worlds came and went, bringing supplies and taking away knowledge. The Federation tried to rule through fear, Morrison said. They made people afraid of anyone who was different. But fear only works until someone decides they're not going to be afraid anymore. Dr. Cooper approached them with exciting news. Captain, I wanted you to know that we've completely cured the poison in Thakmor's atmosphere. The last traces of the biological weapons were neutralized yesterday. Morrison felt a deep sense of satisfaction. How are the Kethvar responding to the treatment? Better than we hoped, Cooper replied with a smile. Not only are they recovering from the poison, but their birth rate has increased dramatically. The species that was facing extinction 6 months ago is now growing, again. Lieutenant Commander Beth Johnson had been working with Cathavar historians to piece together the true story of what had happened 2 centuries ago. Her research had revealed even more Federation lies and cover-ups. We've found evidence that the Cathavar saved over 50 million people during the evacuation of their dying worlds, Johnson reported. The Federation not only stopped them from completing their rescue operations, but they also destroyed the records that would have proven the Cathavar were heroes, not villains. Morrison felt angry about all the lives that could have been saved if the truth had been known earlier, but he also felt hopeful about the future. Dr. Taylor called Morrison from the medical center with wonderful news. "Captain, I wanted you to be the first to know. Zathara has been accepted into the Galactic Medical Academy. She'll be studying on Earth next year." Morrison smiled broadly. "That's fantastic news. She'll make an excellent doctor. She wants to specialize in treating children who have been traumatized by war or persecution," Taylor added. "She says she understands what it's like to feel hopeless and wants to help other young people find hope again." As the months passed, more species joined the Free Worlds Alliance. The new organization was messier and more complicated than the old Federation, but it was also more honest and fair. Instead of one central government that made all the decisions, the alliance was made up of independent worlds that chose to cooperate with each other. Instead of enforcing unity through fear, the alliance celebrated diversity and encouraged different species to share their unique knowledge and abilities. Morrison was promoted to admiral and given command of the alliance's first integrated fleet. His flagship was named the Thakmor's Dawn, to honor the world where everything had changed. The ship's crew included humans, Cathavar, Zephi, Vorthak, and representatives from dozens of other species working together. Captain Morrison's old bridge crew had been promoted to senior positions throughout the fleet, spreading the lessons they had learned about cooperation and courage. 1 year after their first arrival at Thakmor, Morrison attended a special ceremony on the planet's surface. The Cathavar had built a monument, but it wasn't dedicated to war or conquest like the old Federation monuments. Instead, it honored the idea that sometimes the hardest choice is also the right choice. The monument's inscription was written in dozens of languages, but the message was simple: to those who stood beside us when the galaxy said we were alone. War Chief Grakthar spoke at the ceremony, his voice carried by translation devices to the thousands of beings who had gathered to witness the event. "The galaxy once feared us and shunned us," he said. "We were told we deserved to die for the mistakes of our ancestors. But one species refused to abandon us. The humans showed us that redemption is possible, and that the past does not have to determine the future." Morrison felt tears in his eyes as he listened to Grakthar's speech. Around him stood beings from 50 different worlds, all united by the belief that every life has value. The galaxy had learned that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology or their military power. It was their stubborn refusal to abandon those in need, even when everyone else had given up hope. And in the end, that simple act of compassion had changed everything.